Good afternoon and welcome to the Education, Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping. There is no expected fire alarm testing today, and therefore, if it sounds, please follow the fire and emergency procedures that are applicable to the Council House. Please could I also ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that is switched off when you are not using it. Your mobile devices are turned to silence or off. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeat viewing. By entering the Warspite room during the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting purposes. So apologies, I don't think we have any apologies, do we, Jake? Okay, moving to item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest in respect to items on the agenda? No? Okay, moving on to the minutes. The minutes from the last meeting that took place on the 12th of September. Do the committee agree to the minutes from the last meeting? I have Councillor Hayden's name is spelt incorrectly, but other than that, they're correct. So could I, yeah? And a seconder? Yeah. A quick vote? Yeah, just. Oh, sorry, can I get a vote to the minutes, please? Thank you. Item 4, Chair's urgent business. I don't have any. Item 5, tracking decisions. Members are asked to note the tracking decisions log. Is that? Yeah? Okay, item number 6, council tax exemption for Plymouth City Council foster carers. Please can I hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the item before handing over to Nigel Denning and Karen Blake.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you know, this report was referred to this scrutiny panel from a motion presented at full council to give Plymouth foster carers council tax exemption. The report sets out the proposal and the cost implications to implementing a council tax exemption scheme for Plymouth City Council internal foster carers and connected carers who are approved by Plymouth City Council. The reason I wanted it referred here is because I really want the council tax exemption to be considered as part of a new support and retention offer to Plymouth foster carers, which is currently being consulted on and developed. And we really want Scrutiny's input into that because we really want to be able to offer a package that, you know, makes being a local authority foster carer irresistible, looking at things that actually only we can offer. So that was the reason to bring it here, so it could be considered as one of a suite of measures to support and retain foster carers in Plymouth, so that we can really demonstrate how much we value our foster carers. We value all our foster carers, but we really want to underline why we think it's best for people to be local authority foster carers here in Plymouth. It's a real driver for us. It's something we really need to redress the balance around the ratio of local authority foster carers to independent fostering agency foster carers. Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to Nigel.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. So the paper you've got is one of a suite of basket of measures that we would like to develop and work with our foster carers, officers and members more fully over the coming weeks and months. What we know at the moment is we need to be increasing the numbers of our in-house foster carers to the point that we've got more in-house than we have out in our independent fostering sector. The important thing is actually there's a net gain year on year, and that's a particular challenge at the moment because whilst we are successful at recruiting, the pace of people retiring and leaving is keeping pace with the amount that we're recruiting. So we know we need to do something different, and the council tax is one of those things that we'd like to consider. Alongside that, allowances for our foster carers, are we keeping pace with the market? foster carers will tell us the support package is equally, if not more important than a financial aspect. We also think there are more things we perhaps could do that are more unique to being a foster carer for Plymouth City Council to prize those foster carers away from being tempted by anybody else. Additionally, we know we've got some children we are in high cost specialist placements, and we think we could perhaps do something differently around recruiting a different kind of foster carers under different arrangements that would be able to help some of our more challenged young people and children. So we bring those children into the city and we look after them closer to home. So over the coming weeks, we will be setting up something we're going to call it a Foster Carer Summit, and through that we will develop a set of proposals that we will then fully cost up alongside what we're proposing here in terms of council tax relief for those foster carers as well. Happy to take any questions.
I have Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Thank you for that briefing. You say a foster carer summit. So who would be invited to the summit?
So we're certainly going to be inviting some of our foster carers, some of our officers and some members. So if anybody would like to be part of that summit from Scrutiny, you'd be more than welcome to join us for a session, probably about half a day, where we'll be exploring the issues and what some of those options are. I think we've been encouraged by Councillor Lang, Councillor Larry to do a bit of blue sky thinking and then think about what's in the realms of possibilities. So if anybody would like to be part of that, we'd be more than welcome.
Thank you.
Councillor Lang.
I want to underline what Nigel's saying in terms of really thinking, I hate this phrase, but thinking outside the box. Let suggest it and then let it be ruled out. Don't rule it out. Let's not rule anything out until we need to, and just really think about the particular value that we can add as a council and the things that we have access to as a council that, you know, possibly our competitors, because that's what they are, don't have access to. And I think it'd be really good to have some members from this group come along to that, and also because it's a really good opportunity to meet some of our foster carers if you haven't met them in other events and things. Thank you.
So how do we express interest to come along to that, or email, or?
I mean, perhaps people could let you know as chair, Zoe, and then you could pass it on to Nigel.
I'm happy to do that, so send me an email, that'd be great. I have Councillor Macleay.
Thank you. Thinking about the benefits package holistically and what benefits we can bring as a local council, I was wondering whether like Life Centre membership or access to services in that case would be a good incentive.
Yeah, certainly that's one of the things that I think we have actually already got Life Centre membership, but that's the kind of thinking we want to encourage. So yes, more of those kind of things, please.
Chair, may I just say, I want to underline that I really think that we really want to get this right this time round. So the most innovative, inclusive package that we can come up with is what we are really after, because we really need this to make a demonstrable difference as soon as it possibly can. So yeah, absolutely, it's things like that we have access to as a council that other places and other providers can't offer.
Thank you, Jemima. Councillor Stephens.
Thank you. Have foster carers been consulted about, or through informal discussion, about some of the benefits that they feel would enhance their role?
Yeah, absolutely. So they'll be part of that summit. We'll be having our foster carers there as part of that conversation. We've already had some feedback, which is why we know the support that they receive is as important, if not more important, than the allowances. So what we recognise is no one single thing here that's going to achieve what we're trying to set out to do. So their involvement is absolutely critical. And they're actually one of our biggest recruiters by word of mouth and people that they know and encouraging people. So we definitely need them on site.
Jemima?
Yeah, I was going to say that about the word of mouth thing, and it's certainly, from my point of view anyway, and it's only anecdotal and informal, but the issue of around support is what some foster carers will say is the thing that tips the balance when they're looking at deciding whether to be a local authority foster carer or whether to go with an IFA. And actually, we can't underestimate the word of mouth aspect of this. Foster carers talk to each other and will say, oh, Plymouth City Council's doing this, or, you know, this particular independent fostering agency is doing this. So we want to be the thing that they're talking about, and that package is absolutely key to that.
Thank you, Jemima. Councillor Carla?
Thank you, Chair. I think obviously we know that I'm massively supportive of this. This was something we'd been discussing previously with Jean Kelly. That's how far back it sort of went. And I do think, you know, I know that there was talk that we were going to alienate initially IFAs about it, but I think it's a benefit that we can offer as Plymouth City Council, which is what a lot of businesses do. They offer independently their own type of initiatives. But I'm wondering, one of the things that, again, anecdotally, I used to hear a lot of from both sides of it, is about training and about the training that we're offering as well. Is that something that we consider adding into the package?
Absolutely, training around therapeutic support, all that, you know, that being a foster carer is a very different animal to what it was probably, I don't know, even 20 years ago or something, and the training needs to keep pace with that. So that training needs, etc., that's what we're hoping from the summit will really nail and identify particular specific training that foster carers really think that they do need. And I mean, I take your point about alienating. It's a difficult conversation that we're having, because we're not saying we don't value everybody that looks after our children, but we are in a reality where our budgets are a problem, and children's social care takes up a massive amount of our budget, and we have to look at ways to mitigate that. And I think it's really important to say that we really appreciate foster carers. And as Nigel says, the conversation with foster carers doesn't tend to be pay us more money. It's not about that. The kind of people that go into fostering don't tend to be driven by money. They want to be able to pick up a phone and get somebody to speak to because they've got a particular issue with a complex young person who has specific needs that they want some support with, and they look after our children on that basis. So we have to up our game around some of those things. That's been made quite clear to us. But yeah, definitely to underline that the people who do this don't go, you know, money first. That's not where they're looking. They're looking for the whole range of things. And we want to be able to kind of tip the balance a bit and just say, oh, if I decide between these two, what's going to make me go with Plymouth? And I know you support it because it's been, you know, it's been going on for a long time. And that, like I say, I really feel this is our opportunity to really craft something that can make a difference. And this is our chance to get it right. And I'd appreciate as much input from anybody as we can have to do that.
Thank you, Jemima. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. I want to delve a bit deeper on Councillor Stevens's point around the feedback, and particularly around the data that we've been getting on those who have shown an interest and sort of been part of the pipeline into being a foster carer, a foster parent, but not made it all the way through. We've seen, I think, from successive administrations, a greater emphasis on the kind of marketing, the branding that's out there, and that's really to be welcomed. But can I just probe a bit deeper on, you know, when we have that, what does that pipeline look like from the sort of first point of contact where someone responds to, you know, a social media post or an advert on a bus shelter or whatever it may be? How does that funnel look? And why, you know, how do we sort of handhold at each stage of the pipeline? And why is it, I mean, I know you think, you know, the idea here, which I think is a very good one, that this could tip the balance, but at what point of the overall pipeline do we think this is going to make the difference? And you can just a bit more on the sort of the data and how we're really making sure from someone showing an interest right through to the child entering their home that, you know, how does that work? What's the drop-off rate?
So ultimately, we're aiming to have more foster carers successfully go across the whole of that pathway and become our carers. What we do know from our comparing how our conversion rate from those who apply and those who are successful, that tends to be better in a local authority than an IFA. Now that might be linked to some really quite flashy marketing, because actually marketing increases your number of people who may express an interest, but it still might not be right for them. So marketing is only one part of the solution. We do need to increase the amount of people who are coming forward, and then percentage-wise, more of them will come through to being foster carers. What we know since COVID is actually the numbers of families, numbers of households who are got the space have certainly had an impact on the numbers of foster carers coming through. So we do need people with enough spare rooms to have for children, and people in the right times of their lives to take it on board. And what we know is fostering isn't right for everybody, but certainly when people come forward, they might not know that at that point. And that's part of that process, is to very carefully assess and support them. We know that the quicker you respond to when you get that initial inquiry, the better. Whilst people make that decision, within 48 hours, we're making an appointment to get out and see them. We are now going to be part of a regional initiative, which is very much focused on foster care recruitment across the 15 local authorities in the southwest. So there's some Department for Education funding that's starting from now, but from April next year, all of the marketing, all of the advertising for foster care recruitment will go to a virtual hub in the southwest. So they will be managing that whole process, and the DfE are funding a marketing programme to support that. What we'll learn from that is learnings from best examples from other authorities. We'll be able to compare our offer with others. We know that some authorities may be better or worse than us in terms of conversion rates, so there's an opportunity for us to work together, but there will be a single phone point and entry point for all foster carers in the southwest from next April.
Can I ask a follow-up? Is there any more sort of data that you have to hand on the pipeline and conversion rates, first of all? And secondly, it's really reassuring to hear that, you know, there's that rapid response, get that visit in 48 hours. But in terms of the sort of bespoke handhold, can you say a bit more, is it the same point of contact? Do they sort of have a buddy and someone who will talk them through the, you know, is it such a personal thing for somebody to go through? I'd be interested in that side of things, talking through the phases. And then I'm going to add like a third sub question on my supplementary, which is really cheeky, which is, if we're moving to a regional model for advertising, but this is a very specific Plymouth-based incentive, isn't there a tension there?
I'll start with that question. I'll answer that one first. That's why we're really keen to be part of the regional approach. This was going to happen whether we liked it or not, so we're on board and we want to influence that. And there is a desire to think about how we can unify some of those offers, but at the same time we don't want to lose the Plymouth uniqueness. And an example of that is, we know some of our foster carers sit just outside the city boundaries. You know, the children that they'll be caring for go to school within the city, but they might just be outside. What we don't want to do is lose the opportunities for them to come and work for Plymouth through this new approach. So it's very early days, but they're very acutely aware. We'll be all over that. I don't have the conversion rate data with me, but I'm certainly sure that's something we can provide you, either outside or at the next scrutiny. It's absolutely fine. The hand holding is absolutely critical. So Plymouth, we've got a very small number of people who do that and have that personal touch, and we can put them in contact with existing foster carers as well, so they can hear about the good and the difficult bits as well. So what I would say is, the team here we've got in Plymouth are very good at building those relationships, and everything's possible to help them through that journey to be successful.
Jemima?
We do have that data because I've had it before. I don't have the most up-to-date data, but because it's key to know, like you say, where people drop off and which bit maybe you need the more intensive hand holding to be happening. And in terms of the regional marketing plan that's happening, I have the same concern as you, but I think it's just about being a very vocal part of that to make sure that Plymouth is, you know, we work regionally on lots of things to do with children, and I think Plymouth is known to be an authority that speaks up and, you know, makes sure that we carve out our bit of that, and we use this. It's not to the exclusion of other things we're going to do, but that we use this to our advantage as part of the overall drive to recruit more foster carers. And I think the interesting thing is that foster carers that you speak to, the seed of being a foster carer, doesn't tend to be something that happens overnight. It's a long-term thing, happens over years. For that tipping thing to happen, it's something that people talk about in their families for years sometimes before taking that step. So as you say, it's absolutely crucial then that when they make that step, and we've made great strides on that kind of visiting in a timely way, you know, making the most of that contact they've made, because we know it, generally speaking, isn't an overnight thing. They've suddenly decided to do it. So once they've taken that step, we have to make sure that that route is then as supportive as possible. And I think the data that you're talking about is a really important part of that.
Thank you, Jemima. Dylan?
Thank you, Chair. I was really quite shocked to see the level of difference in average cost to the local authority between in-house and independent. I also want to thank you, Jemima, for doing a lot of the legwork on actually making this a reality rather than just a thought in the sky. So thank you for all your hard work on that. And my question is there anything in particular the foster carers have said, this is what this independent agency offers that you don't? Because I can't imagine that what they offer costs that much per year.
I'll go back to the support offer. Interestingly, anecdotally, I've heard things like I had a particularly difficult week, and the young person that I was looking after really needed some extra support, and they really helped me to get that. And then at the end of the week, I received a bunch of flowers. It can be something as seemingly trivial as that, which underlines the value. So I think, and the money, you know, I don't think we should be embarrassed to say that the money can be part of it, and it really is part of these deliberations, is working out if we need to alter our allowances, because even, you know, cost of living, if nothing else, is impacting everybody, whether they're a foster carer or not, and I think that is definitely part of what we're looking at. But the disparity is quite stark, and so that's the imperative, to try to, even if we put our allowances up, it's not going to be anything like what we have to pay to an independent fostering agency. So it will help with our budget, and also, you know, it just helps grow our in-house fostering service.
Thank you. I am coming to you. I have Councillor Stephens and then Councillor Harrison.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I ask if a foster parent lives in a home which comes part of an employment package, and the council tax is paid by the employer, so that could be long-term military, church leaders and so on, so it might be short break foster care or longer term, would the employer be exempt from having to pay the community tax, council tax?
Great question. I'm not sure we've got into that level of detail and problem solving yet, but certainly that sounds like something we need to consider. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm glad we came back, because we're going off the topic of obviously what initially we were here for, and what was the original motion on notice that then brought it to scrutiny that Councillor Carlisle had been working on from previously. So I'm glad we're back on that. But it's my other question is really whether, are we asking any of the young people? I know it sounds a bit ridiculous, but we are, you know, this is about the foster carers, but obviously they are caring for our young people. So at some point, or is there going to be some representation at the summit from maybe some of our cared for young people in foster caring, who might be able to shed some light on what would make the difference, you know, because they're living it day by day as well. That's partly, and the other part, just as a thought process, you briefly said about sizes of houses, that type of thing, and being able to do them. Are we considering things like planning permissions, etc., and making maybe life a little bit easier if foster carers are looking to add bedrooms or add space for their young people, rather than it being a barrier or a challenge? Thank you.
Councillor Lang.
Your second point, absolutely yes. And again, that's a unique thing that the council can offer, support with planning applications. You know, people can come, you know, their house isn't big enough, they might need to add another bedroom, but that would mean they would be able to offer to care for another child. So again, I think that's definitely on the table and part of this summit approach. And when it comes to young people, I mean, I think Councillor Carlisle is the same, there's nothing that we do in terms of this matter that doesn't get the voices of our young people, and our participation team you know, run our listening care council groups, and they would have to be part of this summit, because, as you say, and actually I bet they'll come up with some brilliant ideas that we haven't even thought of. So yeah, I think it's really important. And I wanted to add about the summit that we think the best way to do it, so we don't kind of value engineer it in any way, is that we have somebody externally to facilitate it, and we were thinking of the fostering network who have experience of doing this kind of thing, and they were, you know, that way we can't be accused of not doing it properly or trying to skew things. You know, I think it'd be really good to have somebody like the fostering network facilitating that summit. But absolutely, I think the voice of children always has to be part of our deliberations around this kind of stuff. Thank you.
Councillor Collar.
Thank you, Chair. There's one thing I don't know if you want to have a look into, Jemima, is I know I was asked previously early this year about planning applications and planning permissions and allocation, and I was told that there was something already in place. So it might be something we can delve into a little bit more, because it might be one of those things that an incentive that we do offer, but it actually doesn't get told to people. It might have got a bit buried down, so it might be something to find out and see if we can bring that back up to and be part of it.
I think with all of this, actually, when we've decided what's in that package, then the really important bit is, because I didn't know that, so if I don't know it, I doubt very much anybody who's a prospective foster carer or somebody who might be thinking about coming over to us from an IFA. And I want to add one thing, actually, at something I was at, somebody who was with an independent fostering agency said one of the things that was making them think about making the change was the way we celebrate our young people. Our You Can Do It awards and our Listen and Care Council, and the way we listen to our young people was something quite apart from support and money and all the rest of it that she was really impressed by. And again, that's a word of mouth thing. And so I think, you know, that again, even though we know we're doing these things, it's very important that they form part of this package so that we can talk about it, and it's the sharing of it that's going to be the really important part.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Loveridge.
Thank you, Chair. Jemima, this is just a question for myself, to be honest with you. When a child is in foster care and they go to respite, who pays for that? Is it the foster carer? Because I've always thought it was the foster carer that pays for a child to go into respite. No.
No, that would be us. So yeah, it's no cost to the foster carer to go to respite.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? I just wanted to, I don't have a question, but I did just want to say I've been to a HIMSA training today for how to work with perpetrators of domestic abuse, and there were 2 foster carers there who didn't know each other. It wasn't mandatory, it was completely voluntary, and that kind of is testament to how serious they take the roles that they have, so we should totally be looking after them. The recommendation the committee recommends to Cabinet that council tax exemption for foster carers is considered following the conclusion of the consultation on proposed new support and retention offer to our foster carers, and this would ensure a clear and consistent support package is delivered to increase the number of new in-house foster parents and to retain our existing valued in-house foster parents through an enhanced package of support. And a vote is required, so can I ask you to vote on that, please? Thank you. Okay, item 7, Children's Improvement Plan and Highlight Report. Please can I hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the report before going to David Haley and Nigel Denning. Thank you.
Thank you. So the report sets out the focused improvement plan which is being implemented to drive the improvements which are needed in the Council's Children's Social Care Service to improve the quality of practice and wider arrangements to keep children and young people in Plymouth safe and to improve outcomes for them. The improvement plan and the highlight report summarise the progress which has been made to the end of September and identifies the key priorities for further improvement. This plan is focused on stabilising the service and setting out the actions that are needed for the next 6 months to deliver the priority improvements. The improvements will provide the firm foundations that are needed for the future. And these are the things that the DFE need to see, that Ofsted need to see, because they will be coming soon. We don't know when, but they will be coming. And we need to have a very strong narrative around how seriously we have taken the actions that the monitoring visit identified that we needed to get on and do. And I think this report does show the progress that we're making and that we take it very, very seriously. And I would add that Councillor Evans, who is the leader of the council, comes to the improvement board, to the meetings with the DFE. There's a very clear political support for this being an absolute priority for this council, for this improvement plan to achieve what we need to achieve. And we are, you know, we have made improvements. We have a long way to go and a lot to do, but things are starting to shift. Yeah, and I think it's just important to say that it is an absolute priority to get this right for our children and young people.
Thank you, Jemima. David, you okay?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person today. I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then Nigel will give any further detail, and then really an opportunity for you to ask questions and to scrutinise the plan and the highlight report. So what you have in front of you in regards to the plan is the 6-month real focus plan that takes us to the end of March 24, focused on those areas of most priority, as Councillor Lang has just stated. And they particularly are responding to the focused visit that took place now at the end of December last year, where we really are focused on the improvement within the multi-agency safeguarding hub, the front door, where we have all of agencies and organisations across the city making contacts, referring children and young people if they believe that we need to assess whether or not there is a safeguarding risk or need for that child and the family. So we've really focused there, and the report does demonstrate some significant improvements in relation to stabilising the workforce in the MASH, making sure that everyone has the right environment in which to work, and we are getting strong feedback from staff that they do feel that the culture is changing. The morale in the MASH across all of our partners is good at the moment. We do have sufficient capacity in the MASH, and we do have most of the partner organisations that we would want. We are working with a couple of agencies to ensure that we get their representation in the MASH as well. So it's the capacity and the partnership approach is there. What we're now really focusing on is ensuring that the quality of the work that we do through the MASH and the quality of the responses that all of our partners get continues to improve and improve. We're doing the work in the time scale that we should be doing within a MASH. We're now really focused in on quality. And to help us do that, we have employed 2 additional team managers to ensure that we have that consistency. And those 3 team managers in the MASH currently are helping embed quality work and quality referrals. So, you know, we are now within the sustaining and embedding stage within the MASH. The next part then, if the child needs an assessment, a social work assessment, the work moves through to the initial response service, and we have increased capacity with 6 advanced practitioners, and those advanced practitioners are tasked with helping us to bring down the caseloads within that service area, which are currently higher than we would want them to be. And we've purposefully employed advanced practitioners who are experienced social workers, and they are helping to drive up the quality of the work within the initial response service. And the impact of that, we can see that caseloads for all of our social workers are coming down, assessments are being completed, and they're being completed to an increased good quality, and timeliness of those assessments is also improving. So we are in the really focused improvement phase within the initial response service, and that is likely to take us through until the end of the year. And that is, you know, we're in week 2 of a 6-week sprint plan in relation to that service. But, you know, it will take us through. My aim is that we're stabilised in terms of workforce and work coming in there as we move in to a new calendar year, and then again we can really focus on quality. And then in order to be, you know, upstream on the front foot, whichever phrase you want to use. We've employed a group of 6 social workers with a team manager in the children's social work service, so that as that work is coming through there, we've got the capacity in that service to again ensure that our social workers have manageable caseloads and the quality of the work continues to improve. So, you know, a lot of focused work in that area of the service, which, as the highlight report suggests, is having an impact, and that will then continue to move through. So, I mean, Councillor Riley may wish to invite Nigel to add any further comments, and then, of course, we're all open to any questions or scrutiny that you have on those reports.
Thank you, David. Nigel, would you like to come in?
I think the thing I would add to that is that we are actively now recruiting to permanent posts. So we recognise we've got a number of interim managers, but we're actively recruiting to heads of service, service managers, and our senior leaders at the moment. We are getting applications, which is good news for Plymouth. So part of that stability is creating that permanent workforce.
Thank you. So I have Councillor Tippett.
Thank you, Chair. It was really, really positive to see as one of the headline performance measures, the percentage of MASH contact decisions being made 1 working day up significantly. And I think that's so positive to highlight that we're now at nearly 60%, which is just incredible to where we were just a few months ago. I just wondered if there was one particular thing you think made a real difference at the end of the day in making this difference, or whether it was actually a number of collective measures that came together to make such a positive improvement in our service.
Okay.
I would just start by saying that there was some very focused work in the summer, a real concerted effort to work out what wasn't working in the MASH, and Martine Aquilino and her team came in and did some very hard work and identified a number of reasons why things weren't working. Actually got that right through it was just through sheer hard work. I spent the morning in the MASH the week before last. One of the things, well, 2 things that were identified in the monitoring visit were around thresholds and consent, and that was skewing some of the work. And I don't know what the numbers are in terms of the threshold training, but there has been a programme of training rolled out with our partners around thresholds, understanding thresholds, and that, is it 700 or 800? 600. Oh, 600, okay, sorry, I'm exaggerating. 600 is still pretty impressive, and the feedback on that training has been really positive, and we're beginning to see the knock-on effect of that in the work in the MASH. And, you know, of course, people, you know, it's purely anecdotal what people said to me on that day, but I spoke to colleagues from health, I spoke to colleagues from education and from the police about their impressions of how the MASH was working, and it was overwhelmingly positive. And a really important thing that was identified back in the summer was that morale was quite low there. People didn't quite know how to improve practice in that part of the service, and they have been given very clear direction and really responded to that, and it feels like a much more positive place to work, and I think that contributes to the work getting done better and more quickly as well. And the advice that the team leaders give is consistent now around thresholds and consent. You don't go to one person and get told one thing and somebody else will say something else, and that again breeds confidence in the team that are working in there. So I certainly wouldn't underestimate the amount of sheer hard work that has gone into shifting this. As David talked about, obviously part of that means there's now a bulge in the next part of the service, in the IRT. That's not all the reason why IRT needs this 6-week focus, but that is certainly, you know, once you've improved practice in one bit, then it's going to show up in the next bit of the service, and that's why that's part of this 6-week sprint plan.
David, would you like to add anything to that?
No, what I would say, Councillor Tippett, particularly, is that the data is better than that. So there are, Paul wants to come in. So the live reporting data shows an even stronger picture, whereby the majority of our work now is being completed within 24 hours. But perhaps Councillor Riley would invite Paul in.
Paul?
Yeah, hi there. I was just going to add, and David just touched on it there. I see the data in the background, and what I do know is virtually all of those contacts are cleared within a few days. So it's not that the other 40% are sitting there for weeks. They are probably 95+% are cleared within the next couple of days. So they are on top of that area of work.
Thank you, Paul.
And perhaps I could just add, just for your assurance, that is prioritised and triaged. So absolutely, those that are highest risk, highest priority are managed first, and it would only be anywhere we've absolutely assessed the risk is low risk, and we would need to either say that there is no further action for children's social care or for our early help services, or we signpost to early help, or we would direct it to our early help service. So any that wait 48 hours, for example, are those within that area.
Thank you, David. I have Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can I just mention that some of the reports here have got acronyms in it, and not everybody knows those abbreviations, particularly some of our newer councillors, and I can imagine that they've probably been scratching their heads over some of these reports. So just wanted to pick that up again. It's something I pick up every single term, and it still keeps happening. So just wanted to make that point. Looking at priority 3, robust and effective social work practice, 22 and 23 on there still shows a high percentage there, although in the indication on the 22, which is a percentage of single assessments completed within 45 days, it shows up, and then the percentage of single assessments completed within 45 working days year to date is showing down a trend. I am really concerned about that. 45 working days does seem a long time for a single assessment to take place. Are there any plans to reduce that time length, please?
Sorry, yes, there are plans to reduce that, and it is reducing. Some of that performance is directly related to the work that Councillor Lang described that took place in the summer, in terms of making sure we're on top of the work that was already in the system. What I can tell you is the new work that's coming through now is being progressed in a much more timely way. I think it's fair to say that that performance is unlikely to increase significantly for the next couple of months whilst we are going through that process. We're taking a very responsible approach to those assessments, make sure we get it right for those children and the right outcome. And yes, the 45 days is important, but what's more important is actually we get the right assessment and the right outcome.
Paul, would you like to come in?
Sorry, I'll take mute off. Yes, thank you. Just to add what Nigel was saying there, I think actually what we might see for the next couple months is that position to worsen whilst we recover from all the assessments that have already gone over the 45 days. I know that end of September, about nearly 70% of the open assessments had already gone past the timescale. Whereas at the end of October, I know we're not looking at October, that had improved down to 26%. So there's a lot of work to get on top of the ODA information surf first. So you are going to see a potential decline in that percentage until we've recovered from that backlog.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the team as well for all the hard work they've done in this area. I think it's really good to see a lot of the indicators and the dial move in the right direction. What I don't think is clear from the report, and this might just be me as a relatively new councillor, is the deadline for these targets to be met. It'd be great to have a little bit more context of when we're hoping to reach these targets, just so we know how much praise to lather you with in some of these indicators. And the other point I wanted to raise was on page 18 at the top. It mentions making elected members aware of a practice week in November. It is November, and I'm just conscious that I haven't had any details on that, and I'm just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about it, please.
Councillor Lang?
So Practice Week is the last week of November, I think, if I've got that right, and I apologise if you haven't been given details of how you can join in some of the sessions. I think, by and large, I think they're mostly online, I think. There's plenty that are online, so yeah, I think it would be great if, especially members of this committee, and we talked about it in corporate parenting as well, could joy, I find, I'm not operational, I'm not a social worker, I've never been a social worker, and I think even just sitting in and listening to the discussions that happen around that stuff, it just helps you understand a bit more how the service actually works on an operational level. So I'm sorry you haven't had that information, but we can make sure you get that, so in a way that you can then arrange your diary to hopefully attend something.
Anyone else? No? Yes.
Do you want me to respond to the deadlines?
Yeah.
So David referred and Councillor Lang referred to a lot of stabilisation, put the foundations in place, and we need to do those things to then reasonably expect some performance to increase. I'll give an example of that in terms of both timeliness of assessment, seeing children, but also supervision. So we know some of our managers, for example, have had higher workloads than we'd want. We've increased that management capacity. Once they're in place and we've stabilised, we naturally want to see month on month increase in the amount of percentage of supervision. So the honest answer is these things will come online at different times as we improve the overall quality. Some of this is about cultural shift as well. So it isn't just about remedial work, it's about shifting mindsets and winning hearts and minds. There are different ways of doing this and leading people by example. So having that really solid permanent workforce in terms of our managers, all being consistent about expectations with the right about support and challenge will get us to those targets, and we should see them increasing month on month.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Lang?
And a reassurance that obviously the improvement board, which the DFE are at, and our sector-led improvement partner Dorset chair meets every 6 weeks. So, and they are, very demanding about the targets and us being able to show improvement towards those targets. So they are always on everybody's mind, I suppose, is what I would say. And the sustained improvement now is the thing that we really have to demonstrate at the next board. We met last week, so we've got, this 6 week plan before we meet the board again. But it's a reassurance that there are people all the time making sure that we are working towards those targets, because we have to go and answer to this improvement board every 6 weeks and explain what we've done, how we've got there and where we're going next.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Carla?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, like we said, congratulations to the MASH team and congratulations to Martine as well. I know it's a lot of hard work that they've obviously put in to do this, and so if you can pass on our congratulations. Just come a little bit away from MASH, just going through it all, we've got on priority 6, so number 69, number 76, the percentage of social workers with more than 20 children allocated, that's kind of a concerning amount, especially to the target that we're trying to achieve. And I'm wondering if that's linked in with the turnover rate for social workers. And just a bit of an extra aside to that, is the turnover rate for social workers, is that is that counting agency social workers as well as part of that figure?
So no, the turnover rate is only our own permanent staff. That doesn't include agency staff. Yes, I would say there's a direct correlation between staff retention and workloads, which is so important why we bring those workloads down. The overall averages are important, but actually what we're also very conscious of is the range, because we have a high proportion of our staff that are newly qualified or inexperienced, part of our overseas workers, for example, that have capped coast loads. So averages, we look at that very closely, but we're also making sure we've got the data, and I can tell you every day we are looking at what people's ranges to make sure their workloads are manageable. However, what we also know, the number only tells you part of the story, because one person's caseload of 12 may be far more complex and more challenging than somebody's that got 20, depending on the makeup of those families. So we're often looking at who those children are, where they are, what's the intervention, and what's the balance between child protection, child in need, for example. So it's a complex area of work, and the numbers gives us one way of looking at insight to that, but we look much more deeply.
Okay, I have Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at 25, we see that we've got 15 days, you're working within 15 days of getting an initial child protection conference up and running and at 100%. So that's brilliant, you know, that actually it's going. But earlier on, before that, when we're looking at the strategy meetings, which is 14, we're down to only 2.4% there, which worries me. And I'm just wondering whether or not earlier on it was mentioned, can't remember who mentioned it, that you're still working on getting some agencies to the MASH, to the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub. And I wondered, is it a difficulty in getting certain key agencies involved in the strategy meeting that are meaning that you've got delays in actually getting the strategy meetings up and running when, you know, in a timely way, and which is really obviously important to make decisions about how you're going to move forward.
So strategy meetings was one of those things that Ofsted reflected back to us in the last focus visit. We've had a very big push on that recently. I think one of the reasons why you're seeing a drop in performance because it became very processy, and actually people were driven by the performance indicator rather than doing the right thing for the child. So actually what we're now is focusing on the real quality. There are some issues with the data which we are addressing, so that you will see that go up. But it's more important we're doing the strategy at the right time, which may well be in 24 hours of the referral. It may not be, depending on what we know about the child. And what we don't want to be doing is jumping into that if it's not right at that time. So it's, again, one of those baskets of measures that helps us be curious, but then we look at the quality to see whether it's the right thing for the child. In terms of partners, I would say that our partners are working with us very closely, are really on board. We've done some really focused work with our police colleagues, for example, around the level of contacts and referrals, and that's been very positive. And I also know that some of there were some concerns about strategy meetings and out of hours with the police historically. That's also improved, and so we've got some good evidence of that. I think it's an area we can do more in, and certainly how we support our managers to lead those strategy discussions and capture the needs of the children accurately and the right plan, and that's our focus of the quality assurance now.
Would anyone else like to come in on that? No? I have Councillor Stevens and then Councillor Dingle.
Thank you. It's really good to see on the early help in the front door the improvement there and the processes, because what you've described, there's more clarity and purpose and capability, I suppose, in what's happening there. And it's good that Dorset, the improvement partner, says that it's confirmed what you've said about good progress, and there's a clear link to morale, which is critical. And I guess that's because you've put the strategies improved, but you've also added staffing to help these. Will that staffing level, the existing staffing level, be continued? Are they on short-term contracts to deal with an issue, or will they be continued to make this sort of performance, where it's improving, the norm?
So in terms of the MASH, we actually haven't put huge amounts of additional resources into the MASH. We've been very strategic and tactically in terms of improving our management capacity, because that was an area of resilience. If a manager was off for the day, then we would see performance drop. But actually looking at all the data, looking at all the evidence, actually our MASH is resourced correctly for the numbers of contacts and referrals we expect. So we're now really focusing on practice rather than increasing demand. So what we've got in the MASH, we would expect to see that continue. And, you know, we're in conversations now. What's the next step of the MASH in terms of a front door to both our children's social care and early help? So if there is an increase, it will be around us doing things even better and differently. But we think that the resources in there now are right to meet the demand.
Councillor Lang?
I think it's a good point, though, because there's no point having an improvement plan where you put in extra. There has been extra business support, for instance, in some areas, and it's no good then kind of getting to a place where you're, you know, doing what you need to do in your improvement plan. It's really important that whatever you do is sustainable, and that's definitely something that we are thinking about all along, where we've put in some places, as I say, you know, some of it has been around business support, actually taking away some of the admin tasks from social workers that takes up their time where they could be doing other stuff which could be reducing their caseload, which then goes back to the point around recruitment and retention, and it's all linked up. But it's absolutely vital that whatever we do, however we end up with the service at the end of this plan, is sustainable, because otherwise we'll just, you know, it will all start to deteriorate if you remove resources that have been part of this plan. And I've been very clear on that, and I have discussions about that with David, about what the business as usual is going to look like once we've achieved the aims of this improvement plan.
I will come to you, John, but I just feeding off the back of that, I do think the children's services and the staff within are so enthusiastic. What is the morale like, given the fact that we're in improvement? How are people dealing with that?
Well, I mean, I can give my reflection, and then Nigel and David can say. I think that the monitoring visit and the months after the monitoring visit were quite bruising, and I think that definitely hit morale. I also think that having a DCS leave after a year hit morale. I think having interim service directors, much as our interims are fantastic, it's not great for morale. And I think that something around us making it a priority, and they see it's a priority to get this work done, and then them seeing the improvements from what's been put in place, has really helped morale. I can talk particularly about the MASH, the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, Terry, for in case people don't know what it is, and I think maybe a glossary is probably quite a good idea to give out to people on this committee. But I do, and of course, you know, I've come in, and, you know, you can come and talk to me, and then I know that I was told that people were thinking, oh, you know, why is the cabinet member coming, and were kind of worried about it, but actually they said it was very positive, and I think they were honest with me. I have to take what they say at face value, and actually it was interesting because the police colleagues and health colleagues, what they had observed around the MASH team particularly, was that morale had really improved. It's been a difficult year, but because they can see that you know, it's not great being the focus, the intense focus of this work, but because they can see that it is actually beginning to pay dividends now, they're clearer about the things I've talked about before around thresholds and consent. And that was stuff that was causing them real concern. Consistency at team leader level, all of that is feeding into it being a calmer, happier place to work. And I do think, and I can talk particularly because I've been there recently, that is a place where morale has really improved.
Thank you, Jemima. Councillor Dingle.
Thank you, Zoe. Can I just echo what others have said as well? It's really positive to see the direction that this improvement plan is going in. And a lot of any questions that might be raised are answered quite well in the commentary as well. But there was one thing that I just wanted to see if I could get a little bit more clarification on, and that is number 37, and it talks about the number of unplanned admissions in care, and it's jumped quite a lot. And I just had, you know, I was just wondering if there was any more information on what was surrounding that.
Yeah, so it's a good spot, yes, and I spotted it as well. So all admissions to care come through me. So what I am aware of that month, we had I'm hoping it's a blip. I've no reason to think it's not a blip, but we had 3 families that police responded to calls or incidents at those properties, and when they arrived at those properties, they took the appropriate action to put police protection orders for those children, and quite rightly, they needed to come into our care at our time. Ideally, all children would come in a much more planned way, but the circumstances that the police were called to, it was right for those children. Some of those families were quite a large number of children, so that's what spiked the numbers up. But just to give you that assurance that, first of all, no child comes into care without my know-how or my say so, and that's done in 2 ways. I chair panels every Tuesday afternoon. Apart from this afternoon, actually, I've got somebody else chairing that instead of me whilst I'm here. But then any other child who comes into care outside of those panels, they have to come through me for authorisation, and we'll look at any learning we can from those children. So yeah, I've reviewed every single one, and I'm confident it was the right action at that time.
Any more questions? David, sorry.
I just wanted to comment on the the last question and the response, just with a couple of additional things. First of all, that we do review every planned entrance to care, and that part of that review is about current circumstances for those children. It's also looking back. So one of the things that we challenge ourselves on is, were the right services provided to the children and families early enough on? So was there anything we could have done differently or provided differently sooner that would have stopped them getting into the place where the children needed to come into care in that unplanned way? So just really to assure you that it's something that we want to absolutely minimise and reduce, and we do reflect back and learn, and that then comes through to my bi-weekly quality assurance performance improvement board meeting, whereby we take a look at that. We take a look. First of all, I assure myself as director that those children are safe and in an appropriate place now, and that we're doing all of our work correctly with them now that they are in our care. And secondly, the look back review, the learning, and take that back into our service. We have reinstated a Leaders for Excellence programme, which is where the heads of service, service managers and team managers, about 70 staff across the children's social care and early help services, come together every other week for a morning. And that the purpose of that is about the consistency and the learning and development for those staff, so that we are beginning to be more assured that there are consistent approaches and consistent processes that are going on across our services, and that meeting helps for us to be able to reinforce some of the key messages, for us to take particular themes. So for example, Nigel and colleagues lead particular theme sessions on how do you do a good assessment, how do you write a good plan, and that therefore we expect that then to be then cascaded through down into the services in a consistent way. Thank you.
Thank you, David. No other questions now? The recommendation is to note the report. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, child exploitation update. Please can I hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the item?
Thank you, Chair. The Child Exploitation Update provides an overview and update on the adolescent safety framework that was created as Plymouth's approach to supporting older children and young people experiencing harm from outside the home. The 2 reports set out the aspects of the approach that are working well, such as the daily intelligence briefings, while also setting out some things that can be further improved. Feedback from partner agencies and learning from other local authorities which use the same model is now being taken forward, whilst modifying our approach and tools to better meet the needs of our children and young people in Plymouth. And I attended a DIB, a daily intelligence briefing, a few weeks ago, and I was just so impressed by how well the people on that call knew the young people that they were talking about, and how the sense of urgency was really present in the meeting in terms of working out what to do with the young people that were being talked about. It was really impressive. And again, just an interest. I didn't contribute. I just sat there and watched it happen, because we talk about it, and it's interesting to see it happening in real time. And it was very impressive work from the people that were on that DIB call.
So just to add to that, the report sets out, as we said, some things that are working well. We've had some positive feedback, for example, around our approach to reducing the impact of county lines, and that's a constant ongoing piece of work for us. But you'll see there's some examples there of some really good partnership working to disrupt those county lines and support those young people. Some of the feedback we've had from our partners that whilst the adolescence framework is very good, there are some bits of it that could perhaps act as a barrier. So there's some learning we want to take from that, along with a neighbouring authority who we've adopted a lot of the safety framework from, about looking at the tools and guidance we're giving to our partners in particular, so that actually that's not a barrier to them doing the work. It actually should be enabling them, but some of the tools are quite cumbersome, lengthy, and we wanted to listen to that feedback and adapt them so that we don't lose the essence of what we were trying to achieve, which is to identify those children and young people much earlier on and have the right plans in place. And so the second report that you've got in your pack is from the independent scrutineer of our safeguarding partnership, who's part of that work with our partners around strengthening it even further.
Thank you. I have Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. It pleases me greatly to see this back before the Scrutiny Committee. We're not Rotherham or Oxfordshire or Berkshire, but we do have a child sexual exploitation issue within the city, although it's not on the scales of the other councils that I've mentioned. So I was a bit shocked to see the current situation regarding a multi-occupancy household and how child sexual exploitation was taking part in that venue. Chair, I wanted to look at something which was on page 50 of the report. It talks about vapes and the concern with vapes. As you know, I was extremely concerned at the last full council meeting at how young people were getting hold of vapes and actually adding additional chemicals into vapes, and some with parents' consent. I would like to know whether we have now contacted our education settings and asked that they enforce a ban of vapes within an education setting. I think particularly Councillor Hayden wanted it to be referred to schools within Plymouth. I don't know whether that has happened yet, so that's something I'd like to hear about, please. And the task and finish group that's mentioned in page 51, can I ask who sits on that task and finish group, please? Thank you.
David, would you like to come in on that?
So in terms of the work around vapes, there is a lot of work going on with public health with regards to that. So we are joining up with public health colleagues to get consistent messages, both for adults and for young people across the city. And of course, you know, we support the position in relation to minimising or excluding completely the use of vapes in schools, and particularly the issue that's been identified in this report about additional chemicals in there. So could I ask Annie to respond to your specific question about has that action been taken up with schools, and if so, how has it been received and what impact so far?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Councillor Beer. Schools are very keen to take the strongest possible action against vapes, particularly those that have been spiked, and are also keen to be supported in doing that. We've had public health working with 3 of our secondary schools who had a particular issue with those spiked vapes. And I think that schools are absolutely aiming to avoid vapes coming onto site, in the same way that they would with cigarettes. Can be hard without doing bag searches to be completely certain, but they are taking a strong line, and I'm happy to write to them further to say that we and the council support them taking that strong line.
That's pleasing to hear, Chair, and it's a good job that I raised that at the last full council meeting, particularly with the issue of spiking vapes, because I know it goes on in this city, and I know some parents support that happening, and I'm glad that I was the one that raised it. And child sexual exploitation is one of my babies, really, because when I was a cabinet member, I actually did a review for the City of Plymouth with Councillor Hayden. So I'm glad you've got it on the agenda. I'd like to see it on the agenda at least once a term. I think it's important that we keep reviewing it and keep looking at the figures that are happening and influence us in Plymouth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. Councillor Macleay.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask around the jump in missing episodes from August 2023 to September of this year. I was wondering what you think the reason for this jump is. I would maybe argue that it might be a new school year that maybe played a role in that, and whether we need additional support for these children at times of change and transition heading into new school years, that sort of thing.
I'm not aware of any link to transition between school years. I think we can perhaps come back and give a bit more of analysis in terms of those children, but it's certainly not something that's been raised with me. Sometimes we see some seasonality in terms of missing episodes, and equally I'd expect with sometimes darker nights, colder nights, things like that would also start having an impact in numbers going down. So, but we can come back with a bit more detail if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this. Do you know, I'm absolutely baffled at the Airbnb party thing that I read. I'm obviously massively out of touch with something like that. I can't imagine any adult at all would ever go and book something like that. But obviously, Martine's definitely identified, and she's far more got her finger on the pulse of that type of thing. Just going on to John's report. Firstly, I was wondering if there would be a chance that maybe John could come and speak to the school, because we haven't seen him for a little while, and that would be really good. And especially part of it, as towards the end, he said about the PSCPs, which is the Plymouth Safeguarding Children Partnership, and they've got the Strategic MACE group, which MACE stands for Missing and Children Exploitation. They said they're completing the Children's Society Missing Children Response Assessment Tool, and they were doing that by the 17th of October. I think it'd be quite nice to hear what had actually come from that, and I suppose if we're doing that for the next scrutiny, what the follow-ups from that as well would be really good, if that's okay to be noted.
Okay. So I have Councillor Dingle.
Thank you. So it was quite concerning for me to read in the summary on point 7. It states it is felt that the number of children being identified does not reflect the true prevalence of child exploitation in Plymouth, and that more work is required to develop practitioner awareness into the greater and wider understanding. And I was wondering, you know, I'm aware in my own area that I represent that there's 4, you know, VCS sector, faith-based sector groups that work with young people. Yet there doesn't seem to be much talk of any link with the VCS sector or faith groups in the city, especially with the daily intelligence briefings and stuff like that. So I was wondering, is there any such work going on? And if not, could something be put into place?
Councillor Lang.
I will let Nigel answer that, but actually when I joined the Safeguarding Partnership, I raised the fact that there didn't seem to be any faith groups attending the partnership either, and I think that is a link that we is missing and that we do need to make. So I need to push on progress on that, because yeah, it just stood out to me as a group of people that need to be part of this ASF work.
I think at the moment it's probably when we ad hoc, when we see something that has got a particular link, then we will make those approaches. But as John says in his report, there's more we can do as across the city in terms of wider partnership, in terms of raising awareness and giving people those tools to identify exploitation in its widest sense. This isn't just about sexual exploitation. Criminal exploitation is also another area that we're concerned about. So it's something we can do more, and welcome any thoughts and ideas if you think there's anything we can be doing differently.
Okay, we could possibly make that a recommendation to bring faith groups into the Plymouth Safeguarding Partnership. If you could note that, please, Jake.
And voluntary sector as well, if that's not just the faith groups, the voluntary sector groups.
Okay, no problem at all. Sorry, Councillor Holloway, did you have a point on the last question, sorry, or did you just want to be added to the list? Okay. So I have Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going back really to the thing about the Airbnbs. I know we say that the police haven't been able to do anything because they're not UK based, but surely as a council, are we not able to do something? You know, these places pay council tax, for example. So is there nothing that can be done to actually prevent these houses, flats, whatever they are, as actually being available at all, if we're aware of where they are within our city?
I think one of the challenges that they can pop up at any point, so that it's not an area, as I understand it, is regulated. You don't have to ask for a license to be an Airbnb. People can do that. So, I mean, the good news is we are we hear about it through a number of sources, in particular from young people. We're very good at building relationships with young people. They tell us about these things and we get to intervene. But in terms of stopping it at source and stopping people from being Airbnbs and then stopping somebody from booking it for this purpose, that's incredibly difficult to do that. But we will use our collective intelligence when we hear about those things and disrupt it as best as we can.
I'm just wondering if we could perhaps write to Airbnbs, but Jake's just checking if we can do that now. Yeah, okay. John. Sorry?
It's all right to come in, but on a different point. Yeah? Okay. So I was just reading as well. So, point 8 in the summary as well talks about the universal workforce capability and capacity being inconsistent. Now, I do know that Plymouth Children's Safeguarding Partnership does some really good training around safeguarding. And not so long ago, different organisations in the city used to be able to offer that, be able to get that training for free. I think it was funded, whereas now there's a cost involved. I was wondering, is that cost putting a barrier up to these organisations and maybe contributing to the workforce's inconsistencies?
David, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Can I just go back to the first point and then I'll just make a comment about the second point that you've made. There are really strong working relationships with the police and children's social care around this space. So that example of the Airbnbs, children's services would work closely with the police with regards to, the disruption activity that would need to happen there and how we then, support the young people if necessary that have been involved in that. And there's also then the link across between the safeguarding partnership and into the community safety partnership. So I think we need to ensure that those links are really strong between those two partnerships around this space. And that may be something that if John was invited to the next scrutiny meeting, you might like to ask him to come and give you the assurance that we have got those really strong links across and we're working collectively on that. In relation to the universal workforce, you're right in terms of there are good training development packages available. It is getting the point in the report is about that consistency across for all. And if you think that some organisations are not able to access the training because they're just not able to afford to attend, then clearly that is something that we need to explore. So I'll take an action if Councillor Riley and Scrutiny would like me to do so, to pick this up with John Clements and to just do some fact finding to see if that is the case. And if so, then we've got some decisions to make, haven't we, about how we provide that training, because the important thing for the city is that there is as much consistency across all organisations as possible with regard to this area. So I'll take that forward if you would like me to.
That would be fantastic. Thank you, David. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask my question, I'll just say it's worth noting that the European Union is introducing new legislation mandating Airbnb to share data with local authorities, a decision that the UK government has not chosen to follow. I'm interested in the early mention of online exploitation as one of the types of exploitation in the introduction to this report. And I'm particularly interested because there's only sort of a couple of mentions of online, but it doesn't really surface in the latter parts of the report. We know that criminals who seek to exploit children are evolving with their methods, with their tools and their means, and we're aware of things such as online coercion, blackmail, how indecent images are circulating, and so forth. I'm really interested to understand how in the plan that we have and the methods that we have as a city, how much capacity do we have to adapt to the new and innovative but highly troubling ways in which those that seek to exploit children are adapting online to the impact of children in Plymouth. Thanks.
as any parent would know, keeping in touch with all these different risks is incredibly challenging. I think in terms of our partnership, if we can strengthen our approach to guidance training in a way that it's accessible and can be easily updated, we can get those alerts and we can get those out through our communications to our partners. Some of that can be through the Safeguarding Partnership, but we've got our own publicly facing websites and stuff. We can use information there as well. And I think also, you know, the work we do with our talking to young people, particularly our participation team, we get a lot of intelligence about what's important for young people, and we don't make any assumptions. We know what they're using this week, this month in terms of the tools, but it's a constant one. We're always playing catch up we want to try and keep up with the ever-changing pace of where these risks can come from. And we know that some young people have been exploited exclusively online. That's their whole experience, and we will support them in terms of how they can change their use of technology, change the kind of the source materials that they're using, so we can limit that. But there's more to do, I think, around understanding all those different areas that we need to be aware of as parents and as corporate parents in particular.
Councillor Lang.
I'm happy to ask for that to be an agenda item actually on the next Plymouth Children's Safeguarding Partnership agenda, to find out where we are on that and what we need to do improvement wise on that. Thank you.
Okay. I have Councillor Tippett. You no? Okay. Did I? Sorry. Councillor Loveridge.
Thank you, Chair. In the last 6 months, I've had emails from my residents about children smoking weed, which I think is a massive concern. And to be honest, they're asking me questions that I don't really know the answers. One of these children is 12, which is already smoking weed. I think it's quite sad because we talk about early intervention, we talk about children safeguarding, yet this is where it all, to me, stems from, is children smoking weed at such an early age. What I would like to say in Plymouth, you know, where would we suggest we signpost our children to get the help that they need? Because, you know, when they're smoking weed, you know what we can have then. Children with bad behaviour, exploitation, it all starts from there. And I do find that because it's so easy, you know, to get hold of weed, it's not a costly drug like cocaine, everything else. I just feel that there's nothing in Plymouth. And what can I say to my resident? Where can they go for their children? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
We do have services within the city to support children about advice and guidance on substance misuse. Sharp is just one example of that. And we also have our entire workforce in terms of our youth workers who do have contact. What I would suggest also, that key part of this is identifying those children early on with our partners. So one of the things that we are doing is strengthen our early help offer at a locality level with our partnership with schools at the moment. And that's very much about listening to schools, about children that they're worried about. It wouldn't surprise me if some of those children you've described may also be experiencing difficulties at schools, and that's one way in for us to understand what's going on for those children and put the right support in. Sometimes to address their substance misuse is to address the other factors that's going on in their life. But certainly in terms of, I would always advise for things like cannabis, there's publicly available materials, but our local resources such as Sharp would be a good place to start in terms of if they've got any particular advice they're looking for.
Thank you. David?
Can I suggest that we take an action to bring all of that together in one place for members and then circulate that to all councillors, so that if you have got some of those concerns or you want to give residents advice, then you've got in front of you with hyperlinks all of the local and, you know, some of the good national support services there, you know, at your fingertips, so to speak. And it would be a good thing for us to collate all of that together. I think what services are there, both locally and nationally, to support young people and indeed families with regards to substance misuse. So again, would take that forward as an action and ask the relevant services to do that. But I, support what Nigel is saying. We do have good services in place in Plymouth, but I think your questions, highlights perhaps they're not visible enough in terms of our communication and our media campaign. So we'll do something about that. Both direct information to you so you've got it, and also to think with our comms team about when we might do something to put that information perhaps better positioned on the council website or wherever it would be accessed.
Thank you, David. Are there any further questions? So with regards to a recommendation, this committee would write a letter to Airbnb to review its booking procedures to prevent unsuitable bookings where accommodation is being used for child exploitation. I'm open to amendments on that. Or is that everybody happy with that? Councillor Holloway.
I mean, I think they'd probably argue that it's against their terms of service and that any time that happens, they're notified and they'd stop it happening. I just want that, I think there's probably more that we could do with Byte if there are specific examples or people know of repeat things that could probably have a bit more of a, an impact. I just think we'll get a stop response going, our terms of service say that's not allowed. And I just wonder what we could do that would make it a bit more punchy. If we know of examples and it's a private letter, we could do something a bit more impactful. But
presumably we do have examples, do we? No, David? Do we have examples of this Airbnb for parties?
Well, the very fact that it's been raised in the report, I think, tells us that we do have, and our police, most definitely, our police colleagues would absolutely know because they'd be involved in disruption activities there as well. So I think there may be something both, off nationally to sort of be in Airbnb management nationally, but there may also be something locally that we could also do. So perhaps if we take that away and think about the approach to get the right approach and take the action and let you know what we think is the right thing to do.
I'm happy with that. Is everyone happy with that? Councillor Beer.
Chair, I just wonder whether our comms department would be able to do a press release on something like this so that we can get that out in the public domain so that people do know we've rumbled them and that we will intercept on any of these occurrences within our city.
Okay.
David, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, wasn't quick enough to put my hand up. So again, Councillor Beer, can we take that into our considerations? What I just don't want us to have is any, unintended consequences about this and people thinking, oh, that would be a good idea for the weekend for our Airbnb because it hasn't got anybody booked in. So I'm just a little bit, it is a serious issue and we need to make sure that we address it seriously. But equally, I think I would like to talk to comms team, etc., to make sure we don't have any of those unintended consequences. So if we do that, we'll just drop you a note if that's okay, so we've done it and what we're going to do. And if you've got any comments on it, then please do feedback.
That would be excellent. Thank you, David, because as you know, this is my passion. Thank you. And Chair, can I ask that we have a recommendation to actually bring this back to scrutiny on a regular basis, at least once a year, so that we're kept abreast of what's happening within our city with regards to child sexual exploitation?
Okay, yeah, we'll have that discussion. Thank you, Councillor. So everyone's happy for David to take that away and then get back to you with, yeah. Okay, so the recommendation is to note the report. Are we good for doing that? Perfect. I'd also like to take a couple of minutes break if that's okay with everybody. Just maybe come back at 25 to. Thank you very much. Hi, hello, thank you, welcome back. Hello, welcome back, thank you. Moving on to item 9, performance report. I have Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hello, hi. So you should have the performance report in front of you for Q2. So that'll be covering the months July through to September. Some of the information you'll see in this report will also be replicated in the other performance report we saw earlier. But it's some key indicators across both children, young people, family services, and our education participation and skills services. Myself and Hannah, who's also on the screen, pull this information together. It's again, like I said, it's talking about some of the key measures within that department that we think might be interesting, or things that we'd like to keep an eye on or have you guys scrutinise. And we update this on a quarterly basis with some statistics, with some comparators against our statistical neighbours or England averages, and then also offer up some narrative against each of those areas as well for your information. So that's the introduction. So very happy for Hannah and I, or Nigel and David, or Annie to take any questions.
Okay, I have Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Just as we said earlier on, it's really encouraging, but the referrals and re-referral data is improving because of the work around the areas. But what concerns me is, and looking for the stories behind, if there are any, the increase in the category of abuse, the sexual abuse and emotional abuse. Those categories seem to have jumped. And you know, is there anything that there's something behind that data that would be useful to know?
So I'll start, and then Nigel can hop in if he wants to. So the actual number of children on a child protection plan stayed reasonably static. It's around the 200 mark and has been for a number of months. With regards to the changes in the categories, this would be as new children come onto plans, as other children go off, but also some of the increased understanding when our social workers are looking at these children and look at that to see where they feel that the main cause for that child protection plan is coming into place. Nigel, do you want to add?
We do often see variances. What I also know is that we've been doing quite a lot of work internally around our understanding around child sexual abuse in particular. So we've done additional training. Therefore, I'd like to think that this is a reflection that's being much more aware of those issues within our assessments and then plans and taking the right action.
And because of that, is there a need then obviously for some more remedial work and support work for those children that wouldn't have been needed before because there weren't so many cases? Is the expertise there to support them?
Yes, but obviously if we keep seeing those numbers going up, we need to think about that in terms of any particular waiting times. But yes, we'll work very closely with CAMS and our partners in terms of meeting those individual needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Penrose.
Thank you. I was just looking at the absence monitoring because that was raised before, and I know that there's been a lot of work going on it, and that was really what I would be interested to know about. It says that you've got a new approach this autumn, and I wondered exactly what that, what was made up with this new approach. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really important question. We have had an attendance campaign at the beginning of the term, which in fact I'm going to be very honest here, didn't have such positive outcomes as it could have. It's very difficult because you have to be very sensitive, because you don't want to feel that you're sort of hectoring or lecturing parents and families and such. So we talked about this, in fact talked about it very, very honestly at the Plymouth Education Board, and probably need to have more of an approach which we perhaps use young people themselves more and talk about within schools. And I think this is really important, about a sense of belonging. It's the word I keep using. We need to have that sense of belonging, that children and young people feel that they want to be in school, and this is a place to be. And something else which I think was very interesting is that one of our officers said that we needed to look in more detail in terms of the data and go sort of dig down really granular within the data and actually look at, you know, which lessons are being missed, you know, which schools have got the, you know, you can look at schools, but then, you know, you can actually look at sort of like, you know, which lessons, which parts of the day. We know that Fridays are an issue, and that's an issue up and down the country, and that's probably related back to home working and other things. But this is a big, serious issue which goes right across the country, and it's something that I think we need to, in order to be able to alleviate this, we probably need to really dig down into the data and really look and really be, as I'm being with you, very honest and open here. I think that's what we need to do.
And if I can follow up as well, it's a national issue. I think you'll be aware that across the country it's a real concern for school leaders and indeed for families. So I think every school I visited has said they're doing more about attendance. They've employed somebody to do outreach, for instance. We did discuss, as Councillor Cresswell said, at the Plymouth Education Board last week, and have sent out messages, because one of the things that members of the group felt strongly was that it was important to have an approach where children and families were welcomed and listened to. And in fact, I think what we've heard from with school leaders is that individual approach of listening to what an issue might be for a family, building up trust, it is a really important strand. It's not the only thing, and sometimes there do need to be stages, you know, the carrot and the stick. There need to be formal stages sometimes of following up attendance, but that actually making sure that the child feels wanted in school, that they belong in school, and the family feels listened to is really important, and a message we're pushing out, which I think aligns with what Councillor Cresswell was saying about the feedback from the first approach.
Councillor Lang.
And just to add to what Councillor Cresswell said about looking about, you know, patterns and trends around days or reasons or lessons or whatever, at the Education Board we also talked about looking at particular hotspots, if there are particular schools or groups of schools or cluster areas or localities where, excuse me, where absence is higher. We need to look at that, and that might lead to some difficult conversations, but we've got to take every bit of data that we can find to try to work out why, not why, well, yes, why, but also how we encourage those children back into education, to get the education to which they're entitled, because so many children are missing out at the moment.
Councillor Cresswell.
And some of our schools are doing some really, really good work on this. You know, I think we have to also be celebrating the positives as well. That's really important. And some schools are doing some really good work. I did a piece for West Country Television in which we filmed out at Plymstock School, and we had some very impressive young people who were interviewed on television, and all sorts of approaches used to actually make, particularly the start of that day and such, a warm and welcoming and a sort of like a gentle way of coming into school, because we have to recognise that our children have been through quite a lot, all children have been through quite a lot of disruption, in some case real trauma, in terms of being due to COVID, and, you know, getting them back into school and welcoming them back in is really important, and it's all of our responsibilities, and we have to approach every single avenue, and we have to make use of those schools that have been successful in doing so, and celebrate and use that learning.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at 2.4, where it's the key stage 4 outcomes, it is really disappointing to see the drop in percentage of pupils achieving 5+ in English and maths, which, as we know, is absolutely vital for them getting ahead to do anything of a further sort of platform. And for the fact that it's dropped down to 41%, we're really far behind on the southwest against our neighbours, and certainly against England as well. Firstly, sort of why are we seeing that that's such a significant drop that's happened onto our most subject? And also the figures that we've got, this will also probably be a question for Paul as well. Is that all pupils, or are we able to break it down into our looked after children or SEND as well?
It is disappointing to see it go down. I think we should be aware that the way that the exams were carried out changed from the previous 2 years. So the previous 2 years, with the pandemic, there had been additional support and there's more generous grading approaches to take into account the experience of the children. And that wasn't the case. It was back to straightforward exams, no advanced information about topics. And what has been found and was expected, doesn't mean it should have happened across the country, was that children in more disadvantaged areas struggled more with the exams. We will have a full report in the February scrutiny when we have all the approved results through, so we will have much more detail then. We are aware already of where there are differences between schools and some information about groups as well, but it's not the final results, which don't come through until January, and we then report to this group in February.
Just to add to that, there is a section there which says that the attainment will be looking at a breakdown in those other cohorts and groups and seeing how they are actually comparing. I think it would be quite useful as well to look at not just comparing us just with the Southwest, but I think it's always really useful to compare us to similar authorities. I think those are the really valuable data. And I think you have to go back, and I've often said this when I was scrutineer and such, is you need to go back with the data and look back, because those last 3 years are not particularly typical because of the fact of the impact of COVID, and you need to actually sort of look back sort of 5 years previously and actually have a look at those figures and see what the trend is. It's fair to say that the trend in Key Stage 4 results in Plymouth has been below national expectations, and that has been a long term issue, and I think it's a long-term journey that we have to go on as far as seeking improvement. But I think digging down deeper into the data is always really useful, and I'm always delighted when some of this comes up and is asked, and they're very salient questions being asked at this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at 2.3, where in reference 7, where it talks about a drop down in the percentage of 16 and 17-year-olds with SEND who are in education, employment and training. Obviously, we know that we're now looking at the new sort of seats seeking education, employment and training. So it is sort of worrying or concerning for me to see that we are dropping down rather than sort of moving upwards. And I see that it is an area of focus, but is there anything particular we're doing, or is there any particular areas of work that you can tell us about that would to help young people who are 16 and 17? It may have something to do with what we're also seeing in terms of the reduction in the number of GCSEs achieved, but obviously it's a concerning pattern that we're going downwards rather than upwards with a new policy.
Thank you. I see, Hannah, you have your hand up.
Oh, yes. So September's data is included within the Q2, which you have there, and it's worth reminding you all that actually in September we do have a number of children and young people whose destinations are not yet determined. DfE will not let us include intended destinations into that data, so we won't be reporting next quarter either, because of course that's all very much impacted. In terms of the decrease, that will account for that, although we do still remain underneath our benchmarks, as we have done for many reports.
Thank you. Sorry.
And I think if I can add to that, so we track this closely. As Hannah said, there are sometimes seasonal undulations around September about where children are settling into their sixth form, post-16 places or not. There are a number of things going on. We heard Tina Brinkworth talk about those last time. That links with what schools do as young people in year 10 and year 11 are looking ahead to where they're going to go for sixth form. We work with schools to make sure that there are good processes in place there. We've just been talking about a conference for those who provide for the courses for those in reference point 7, the children with SEND. So there is a lot of work going on to make sure the structures are right. And then increasingly, I think we're getting better at the advice given to individuals. So I think there's something about both of those, having the right offer and then advising children to get them onto the right course and really supporting them once they're on that course. So when we're talking about some young people, 16 to 17-year-olds with SEND, who may not be going into traditional education training, we've previously spoken about things like cost of transport, school transport, things like that. Is that still having a bearing in terms of young people maybe looking at the options that are feasible for them? You know, is that a barrier, or is it more about actually just the right course or the right thing that they should be doing, right activities for them? I think the right course is the most important thing, but sometimes the cost of transport or the difficulty of the journey is a factor for some of them. I think everybody would prefer to have an easier journey, so that is a factor. I don't think we have actual figures on that, because it's something we could look into more.
David?
Thanks. So just a couple of points in relation to both the absence from school, the mobility, the exclusions, and the link across with that into attainment and progress of our young people. Within the report that we bring in February, we will bring that analysis. So, you know, we need to see if attendance at school is a factor on achievement, which we would expect it to be, and we need to see what that looks like across the city. And also we'll bring that breakdown for all of the vulnerable groups so that we really know the cause and effect of those things on children's outcomes. I think it has to be really stated quite clearly that this is an absolute priority for children's services and for the city, in terms both those things around attendance at school and being at school so that you can learn. And then when you are at school, being in the place where your behaviours and the way you approach your work is leading you to achieve the best outcomes you can get and fulfil your potential. So there is, a significant journey to be done in order that we work with our schools to address some of the challenges that are set out within that report and will be set out further in February. And through the place-based working group of secondary multi-academy trust chief executives and the place-based the Plymouth Education Board, there are 2 strategic places which they absolutely are addressing this, and it's their highest and top priority to address these factors, and it features highly and is the predominant discussion point at their meetings. So it's about how we really understand what are the key actions and key drivers that we can take at a strategic level across the city to help improve both of these. In relation to children with special educational needs, access to education, employment and training, there is more to do to raise the profile with businesses, with the communities, with organisations about how we do meet the needs of children with special educational needs and disabilities. That is all part of the SEAT strategy. It does need more, it needs to become more visualised, and we need to ensure that through that strategy we really sort of push that ambition out across the city, and that we, with our teams, help and support any employers, including the council and other organisations, to provide that support for them. I mean, just a couple of examples. We're looking for apprenticeships across the council that we can help and support, and we're also looking for work placements. So something's gone out recently to all senior managers across the council to ask them to look favourably for work experience placements for children and young people, and that would include those that we've got corporate parenting responsibility for, who are looked after, and those who have got special educational needs, particularly within those vulnerable groups. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Cresswell.
Just to follow up on that, I think what David said is really, really important, because we actually need to be also, as a council, leading by example. Also, I think that's very important, and we've got a good strategy written in terms of our seat strategy, but the proof is the impact that it actually has, and that's what we keep coming back to and keep saying, is that we have to be looking, so we have to be looking 12 months' time and seeing, has that actually had an impact, and are we seeing those numbers all going in the right direction? And it is a whole package together in terms of attainment, attendance, and then life beyond 16 as well.
Last question on this, Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. Yeah, just picking up further on the attainment levels of level 5 plus in English and maths. Do you all have a sense of if we know the split between where pupils are falling down on English and or maths, or both? And I wondered if we could get a reaction on, obviously there have been announcements over the course of this year regarding extending maths provision to young people to the age of 18, and what you're sort of at a national level, and I just wondered what steps are being taken locally to kind of look at that announcement. How are we implementing? What's the reaction of our experts in the council and education professionals across the city? Will it make a difference?
Hannah?
Yeah, I'd like to answer the first part of your question there, which is around whether or not we can break down the English and maths separately within the data. The release that happened earlier this month was a provisional release, and so therefore only the highest level of data. In January, as Annie alluded to earlier, we'll get the characteristic breakdowns, and we should be able to get more subject-specific breakdowns also, and in which case we'll be able to report at that in the scrutiny at that time.
Just to add to that, Hannah, I wonder if it's possible, because people are asking, and I think rightly so, asking about this data, and I think perhaps it would be good to be able to look at it in a bit more detail in terms of figures like going back a bit further, and also compared with other local authorities, and that sort of, and once, because this is obviously unvalidated data, if we're looking at that data and comparing the results in English and mathematics would also be interesting to look at. On the subject of which the issue in terms of extending the teaching of mathematics beyond 16, young people who aren't successful in getting their maths at grade 4 or above do retake, and so maths teachers have to be useful for them. And also, in addition, those people who decide to go on and do A-level maths need to have highly qualified mathematics teachers who have, ideally a good degree in mathematics or a mathematical based subject. I think there will be a challenge, and I don't know how much schools have been looking into this, and probably Annie can add more, but I think there will be a challenge in terms of teacher recruitment and retention, of being able to teach mathematics to the whole of your sixth form, given that you might well have people who have got a good sound GCSE in maths and really don't want to actually be taking maths on any further, and when you actually want to make sure that those who need to pass mathematics have good quality maths teachers, and those who are going to do A-level maths also have good quality maths teachers.
Yes, if I can come in, I think there is, I think as Councillor Cresswell said, a little bit of scepticism about whether it can actually be resourced. So I think there is a bit of a let's wait and see approach going on. And I know that what the government put forward was a number of sort of round tables and discussions rather than actual policies. I think the college in particular is keeping a very close eye, because in some ways they'll be most affected with that large number of sixth form students. So they're keeping a very close eye and are involved in responses, etc.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is to note the information set out in the report. Is everyone happy with that? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 10. Children's Services Finance Report. Please can I hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the item before moving to questions?
Thank you. So before you today is a copy of the 2023-24 budget and 2023-24 forecast outturn report as at Q2 for Plymouth Children's Services. This is an overview of how the Children's Service performed financially through the first half of 2023-2024 financial year. The overview has been split by both the Children, Young People and Families and Education, Participation and Skills departments, and the report details key areas such as spend on CYPF placements, delivery plans and key budgetary changes. I don't think there's any getting away from the adverse variance that is reported in this Q2 report, which is mostly related to placement costs, our high cost and bespoke placements, and David and Nigel can talk to the mitigations around this. I know, for instance, we're recruiting, or maybe have actually recruited, a particular post within the commissioning team, somebody whose role will be to try to drive down the costs of these placements. And a piece of work is being prepared for me by Matt. Thanks for joining us, Matt, who's poorly, that's why he's not in the room today. Being prepared for me to understand exactly where the money is going on our very high cost, our top 20 high cost placements, because as I say, Nigel and David can talk about some of the mitigations, but you know, we have had discussions among ourselves around an LGA report last week around the profits that some of the providers in the country, you know, a national report on the profits that those companies make, and we can see very clearly in this report the impact that some of that is having on our budgets here and how we manage our budgets and how we plan ahead. And it feels like we are, you know, it's very much a provider's market, and it's very difficult for us to try to drive down the costs of those placements. But when we have this person in post, that is going to be, they're going to have very clear targets around that role, and about what we are hoping they will achieve in this area for that post. So that's one of the things that we're doing in this space, because we're not alone in this in Plymouth. It's not a Plymouth problem, but obviously it's our problem because it's Plymouth that we care about. So we really need to see something change in this area, and I feel that it's incumbent on me and all of us actually in any forum that we get to talk about this, and that actually, even though we can mitigate things for ourselves in Plymouth to some extent, unless there's some kind of national conversation about this, it is going to be a problem that drags not just Plymouth but other councils in the country, drags their budgets into a place of real difficulty. And I don't feel that there's a national grip on this or a national concern about this particularly. I know this is a conversation that councils and people who have my portfolio role have all the time. So I'm just using this opportunity, as I use any opportunity I get, to raise it, because I feel like we're going to get to a point where it's just become such a problem, not just for Plymouth, as I say, for every local authority that has, you know, high cost, bespoke placements which are providing vital care for young people. That's not in question. It's the amount of money we're paying for those placements that something has got to be done about it. But I don't know if Nigel or David want to talk more about some of the other mitigations around those placements.
So as you'd expect, we have a lot of oversight and scrutiny of placements of both children coming into our care, but also those children that are already in our care. Are they in the right placement? Have we got the right plans for them? And are they being achieved at the right cost? Sadly, what I can say is every time I need to bring a child into care at the moment, there are no choice of placements. If I get an offer, it's one offer. So we are very much at the mercy of no competition. That said, we will do our due diligence and drive down the costs as much as we can. We think there's more we can do on that, and that's why we've recruited some additional capacity into our brokerage stream. That person arrived this week, and we've also got a project officer who's arriving next week who has got experience of driving down these kind of spend. It's no longer about the numbers of children necessarily in our care, it's about those children being in the right placement that are meeting their needs at the right cost and those unit costs. And to give you an example, although our numbers of children in residential have come down due to that level of oversight and scrutiny, our overall costs have still gone up because of the cost of those placements and particular needs, and quite a risk-averse kind of marketplace where they will only accept those children with a certain level of staffing, for example. But we are reviewing every single child in our care to make sure we're scrutinising the payments. Are we getting what we're paying for, and do we still need that level of intervention and support? We're asking that question for every child.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Oh, Councillor Harrison.
I'll just go back to that. My previous question, when we looked at the previous item, when regarding transport, I see that obviously the costs have jumped up. The forecast has gone up again for transport. Is that linked to what you're saying about the placements then, and where children are at, where they need to get to? You know, I think we've spoken, discussed before about actually it's really important if a child is in. Has to be placed somewhere else, it's really important that you keep some of what they already know. So if that means that they're needing to go to school, for example, you know, in their existing school rather than being moved, you know, is that then costing us more in terms of transport, that type of thing?
I can answer that. No, there is a small amount of money usually overseen by the virtual school that looks after the children who are in care and their education, and if there is a child having difficulty, they can support them for a period with that. But on the second table, the EPS table, where you can see the increased amount for transport, that largely relates to the transport for children with special educational needs getting to special schools, where not every child but a significant number, we transport about 800 children a day, and the increase in costs is a mixture of things. It's partly to do with the increased costs per taxi, which is linked to fuel and linked to employment costs, and it is partly due to increased numbers, and we are placing a small but slightly increasing number of children outside Plymouth, so longer journeys. So that budget, as you can see there, it's the approved budget's 5.849 million is the largest part of the EPS spend. There is more money that goes into schools, but that comes from the dedicated schools grant. So in terms of things that are actual council allocated spend, it's a really significant feature for us, and certainly Councillor Cresswell and I are spending a lot of time really looking at that with a number of other colleagues to try and make sure we're testing and challenging all the costs involved and seeing if there are better solutions, better value solutions to make sure those children can get to school.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate that. I think we've been working really, really hard to look at ways in which we can make savings on this budget in lots of creative ways, also looking out of the box and looking about what other things that we can do. And we've got almost like a team together, haven't we, in which we have been working on this. One area that we've been looking at, which is really important, is travel training for our young people. We've got other things that we've also got, but I particularly mentioned travel training because travel training is important from the point of view in the perspective of obviously saving money if a young person can travel by bus rather than by taxi, but it's also very important for their actual individual development and giving them that sense of independence. And I think we have to work very closely with the parents on this. I think it's very important because if your child has special educational needs, there'll be some children who will never be able to do this but has special educational needs, you tend to be quite protective. And I think being able to sort of work with parents and with young people so that they gain that necessary independence of being able to travel, say, for example, by bus, it might even be by bicycle, but being able to travel independently is actually really important. And I was actually just recently I was at special needs provider Eat That Frog. It's a great story. And a young person there has become an independent traveller because she's actually manages to ride her electric scooter to her place of training, which I thought was absolutely brilliant and inspirational. And I think her parents were a little apprehensive, but she has been able to do that and has obviously acquired a considerable amount of independence and has added to her self-esteem.
If that's possible, there's been in the news some new schools specifically supporting children with SEND. Are they going to help in terms of being in the city and and therefore sort of less travel potentially?
We would like to have all our children, unless they have a very specialist need, at state-maintained schools rather than independent schools. We know that the quality of our state-maintained special schools largely is very good. We've had the odd blip, but it is strong. We've had some recent Ofsteds that indicate that. The cost, a bit like placements, the cost of independent special school places is very high. That does come out of a slightly different budget, but it's still, we're accountable for it for the dedicated schools grant high needs block. So we would like to minimise the number of children who go to independent schools. It is more helpful if they're close by because the transport costs are reduced. So I think we have mixed feelings about that, I think. And occasionally I think it's a known phenomenon that when a new school opens up, parents start applying even though they might not have thought about their child going to a special school before, so that it can sometimes increase the number of applications for specialist places. So we are again looking closely at that number of independent places, which has gone up recently because our maintained special schools are at capacity.
Okay. So the recommendation is to note the report. Is that okay? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 11, the local area partnership SEND improvements plan. Please can I hand over to Councillor Creswell to introduce the report.
Thank you very much. I will try to be fairly brief in my introduction, and then hand over to Annie to give more detail. Work has moved forward to ensure that children and young people with special educational needs and or disabilities, which is SEND, receive better care and support in Plymouth following the inspection earlier in the year. The joint local area SEND inspection by Ofsted and the CQC took place in June and reviewed the entire partnership, which includes the council as well as NHS Devon, University Hospitals, Plymouth NHS Trust, Livewell, South West and local schools and colleges. The inspection identified significant concerns about experiences and outcomes for children and young people, with rapid improvements needed. Staff had worked closely with partners to develop this SEND improvement plan, which has now been agreed by the council. This involved listening to families, children and young people to take their lived experience into account, as well as working with 120 early years settings, school and college leaders to incorporate their feedback. The new plan sets out clear priorities and aims to rebuild trust in our local SEND system. A new externally chaired 6-weekly Plymouth SEND Improvement Board is in place and will oversee accountability for delivering the actions set out in the plan. The first meeting took place on the 2nd of November, and a number of other groups will take forward the work as set out in the governance diagram. We are now being supported in this work by a resource provided by the Council in terms of project leads and the DFE in terms of an advisor and training. We will be expecting to report to Scrutiny on a very regular basis. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Annie with a bit more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell, and Scrutiny will be aware of the report that was reported on at the last meeting and has been in the public domain since August, with those 5 areas of priority action and 4 areas for improvement. And we spoke at the last Scrutiny about the work to develop a plan to address those really important areas that will, when implemented, will significantly improve things for all our children with special educational needs and disabilities. Probably want to just mention on page 5 of the report, page 29 of the pack, the governance diagram. Councillor Cresswell talked about that external board. That we would have set something like that up anyway, but we're also required to by the DFE, who will issue an improvement notice that we expect to be published in the coming days. So councillors will see that. But you will see that, as happens with work in partnership, close working with health, close working with schools and colleges, and obviously across children's services, that we're all present there in that governance diagram. Some of the strands of work fall within one particular service. So, for instance, health waiting lists, very much a health issue, although it affects children known to all our services. And similarly, for instance, SEND sufficiency is going to be led by the council, although, again, where the children go to school affects many different services. So there's more there about the groups, both working within services and cross-service, and how they will work together. And then the plan from page 35 of the pack, page 11 of the particular pack on the improvement plan, is set out there with completion dates, and we, as Councillor Cresswell has said, we will expect to report regularly. I think we spoke at the last meeting about how important it was that schools and colleges are fully engaged. I think we have a launch with them, I think in a week's time, online, to talk to them further about the plan, what each individual school needs to do, as well as having representatives on the different working groups. And they've welcomed that involvement, and I think will welcome further input and dialogue about what they, what schools and colleges should be doing. I think the other thing, and it links to other discussions earlier in the meeting, is a range of activity in here about children who have needs that are both special educational needs and social care type needs. So really looking at the risks those young people face and making sure we are joined up in the steps, the early intervention, which David referred to, that we try and intervene as early as possible across our partnership to make sure that children don't lose out on education or aren't put more at risk. We're happy to answer any questions, receive any thoughts, any challenges, and we do expect to be reporting regularly on the plan and its implementation.
Thank you. Councillor Macleay.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, a point of clarity on 1.4. I know that the completion date was in October, and obviously we're now in November, and I'm just wondering if the progress monitoring on that particular outcome needs to be updated. So it's on page 35 or page 11, depending on which.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you're right. There should have been a progress monitoring. I suppose we were still in October when we published this. And indeed, Hannah's been working on the scorecard that has the targets around all those indicators that you can see there. So that next time you see this, it will have the scorecard with it in a similar format to that which the Children's Services Board has. But thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions? Councillor Beer.
Can I just ask, are we building in additional capacity for our SEND young people in the city? Because there's a special needs school in my ward, for example, that's absolutely bursting at the seams, and they could take on another 70 children if they had the space and capacity to do it. So is the council planning to do that? If so, when? And how are you going to work towards getting that out there? Have we got any existing schools that we could open up to take overspill of our SEND, to make them into SEND schools to cope with the capacity that we need in this city at the moment? That's the biggest complaint I'm getting, actually, is we're not got capacity. And there are children who are SEND children who are not going to any form of education. That's not right, is it? That is definitely not right.
So the sufficiency of SEND places is a key priority, and it is in the plan, I think, under Action 9, under Area 9, and it is something that we will be bringing to this scrutiny panel. We'll perhaps talk about timing outside the meeting. We do need more places. We've had some analysis work being done on the trends, so that you will know that special schools have different designations, they have different specialisms. We want to make sure that if we're investing quite a lot of money in capital buildings, that it's the right specification, the right need that we are providing for. We do, alongside the increased percentage of our children who have EHCPs and therefore some of those need a special school place, there is that decline in primary numbers. So we do see some physical space becoming available in primary schools. So there is some potential synergy. I don't think the primary school places will be sufficient, but that is within our strategy that I've certainly been talking a lot about, and Councillor Cresswell is aware of, but we expect to publish the strategy in the coming months, and that will set out the next steps for creating more physical space, whether it's an extension of a current special school, either on their site or outside their site, or more units within primary or secondary schools. We absolutely need to do it, and we need a clear timeline for doing that. So that is on its way, and we would welcome scrutiny input at some point on that.
Okay.
Yes, can I follow that up with another question? Sorry to hog the meeting a little. We've got young people in primary schools now with SEN issues, and a lot of primary schools, I'm only talking about the primary schools in Plymouth and our ward, who are saying they've struggled to cope because they haven't got the wraparound care around those young people, and that's putting an awful strain on the actual delivery of education to those who are wanting to participate in learning, but also it sort of leaves these young people with SEND way behind, and I can't help it, but I'm just truly concerned about it.
Thank you. It's a challenge for Plymouth, and it's a challenge known nationally, where there are a number of children coming through showing increasing needs that it's really difficult for a teacher to meet in a classroom. And we think that some of that is linked to the pandemic, still that some of these children haven't had much socialisation, so they might have had a need that could have been managed if they had socialisation, but it's really difficult having had some years of isolation. So it is a challenge for our schools, and we are funding places at higher bandings. So children get different amounts, the schools get different amounts of money depending on the severity of their need. We're funding more places in mainstream schools at higher banding. It is a concern, and it links to having sufficient special school places as well, but also alongside our schools being as inclusive as possible without disrupting the education of the whole class.
I think one of the things that also came out of the SEND inspection is that we do have we do again have some pockets of some very, very good practice, and particularly I'm talking now about primary schools, and there's good practice in secondary schools as well, but really good practice in which teachers and classroom assistants being able to be very, very creative. And also as well, we are talking about EHCPs, but actually the code of practice starts with, it's a graduated approach, and what we really want to make sure is many children as possible don't end up with an EHCP, and they are actually able to be continue their education within mainstream school, and using the graduated approach so that their needs are actually able to be fulfilled within the classroom, perhaps with a bit of extraction and such from some all class activities. And I think there has been a lot of this. Also, we have to also celebrate there has been some very positive work being done in some of our settings in a very creative and professional way.
Thank you, Councillor Criswell. Are there... sorry, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. I really like this report, because particularly as it's, I don't know if this is typical, but it starts off with a parent and carer forum at the start, introducing it. And I thought that's a really powerful message for the commitment for the city to improve its provision, especially when they say that it's a co-production and that we're confident. I've spoken to Senkos in primary schools in the ward I represent, and they were really pleased about the engagement they've had with this plan. You've answered the question, but because it'd be good for all schools to have this plan, but that's in the pipeline. And it states in here as well, some of the risks of the improvement not working include morale, overload. What's the other thing? There's something else as well. But the word budget isn't there, and the elephant in the room is it will answer your problem as well, Councillor Beer, is that local authorities, and in turn schools, have been starved from the appropriate funding to meet the demand to support special needs, children with special needs, for well over a decade. And I'm just conscious of head teachers already starting worrying about their budgets next year. So the risks of the local authority not being able to implement this are also reflected within individual schools, but the risks of not being able to cope with their own and want to manage well the needs presented to them. So I want to ask, when you met with head teachers in September, was it the 20th of September? And use. What was the response from head teachers, and what was the level of buy-in to say, right, we're in this together as schools, as settings, as local authority to make this work?
I think the level of buy-in from the colleagues who were at that workshop was high. I think they were there because they wanted to be engaged, they wanted to absolutely do the right thing. One of them did say, what about the schools who aren't here? So and wanted to make sure that actually in the plan we had a way of reaching out to colleagues who don't engage as much, and to make sure that we did that so that it isn't those who turn up who are implementing back in their schools. So I think that was a point that was well made and is in here about that reach out to all schools. There isn't much about budgets in here, and I think we decided not to raise that as a barrier in this plan, because we think that there, as Councillor Cresswell said, there are some schools that are examples of good practice that are managing with high numbers of children with special needs on their budgets, and we want to make sure that good practice is shared, that we make the most of our resources that are here already. I think there is something probably about campaigning for more money and for changes to systems. I think that probably sits separately from the plan.
Yeah, but deep down in your heart, the pound sign is there, because it's, and I'm not saying a lot more money makes a bigger difference, but it is it's for the high level needs children, provision in terms of health support, education support, and infrastructure is a bit of a barrier. Yes. But I do like this. And you mentioned about engaging with schools on line next week. Is it possible for elected members to join in that as observers? If
Yeah, we'd be very pleased to have you. We'll make sure that the invitation comes around to scrutiny. Yes.
Thank you. And thanks for putting all this together as well, you and your team.
I'd like to give a special mention to Hannah Dorr at that point for pulling a lot of it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cresswell.
If I could just add something that came up at the local area Send Our Improvement Board on the 2nd, was we had present from the from one of the special schools, and special schools are actually very keen and able to, because they have obviously a lot of expertise to do that outreach work. That does go on between the special schools and other schools, and I think we did discuss about the possibility of how that could be, how we could sort of build that in, because that will require some resources as well. It can't be just done on goodwill, and how we could be actually looking at building that in, because I'd actually been to another school the previous day in which there'd been some good work that had gone on with that with that particular school and another and a special school in order to work with the children, which was proved to be very beneficial and productive. But it did actually come down to how did the head put it? It was about calling in a favour or whatever. But you will probably know about that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I have a couple of things myself, if that's okay, Annie, please. Firstly, on page 24, 3.3, it says that there's an option for professional development and support for all partners to take with the LGA and the DFE. I just wondered, so obviously it's not mandatory, it's optional, but how are we going to go about, getting people in to do that? And how will it be managed and implemented, please?
Sorry, Councillor Riley, is that 3.3 of the briefing?
Sorry,
yes,
it's just
3.3 of the briefing.
page 24.
Yeah, so I think professional development is down in two ways in the plan itself. One is for Plymouth City Council, alongside with our other partners, to make sure there is a really strong programme of professional development. We will draw on the LGA offer and the DFE advisor in contributing to that, but there is some strong practice in Plymouth anyway. There is another point within the action plan which is about leaders of organisations ensuring that all their staff engage in the training, and we think that was really important to put in, because again it's you can get the willing few, but actually you need everybody in a school to have a certain level of training. So that is one of the things we are going to be emphasising with our colleagues who are school and college leaders, really to get that full buy-in. And it's the same with my service and Nigel's service, that we need everybody to have a certain core level of training suitable for their role. Others, like Senkos, need hugely expert training and have a national qualification, but there should be some graded training that's appropriate for roles.
Thank you very much. And my other question is the routeway into special educational schools, such as, obviously, you know where I'm going, ACE. So I wonder how is that done, and how can we monitor it to the point where potentially kids from mainstream schools are being placed in these places? Experience of such is quite damaging to see that potentially the very small things are being placed in the school that probably could be dealt with in a mainstream school. So I just wondered how can we monitor that, and if even we can?
I think some of that is to do with the approach to inclusion in schools and the work to reduce exclusions. That there is talk, there is activity about that written into the plan, which is for children with EHCPs, but that's not all the children who are end up in alternative provision have EHCPs. So I think monitoring the exclusion and suspension figures are really important for this group. I would say that would be the key indicator, and we want to see those really going down. So that's an indicator, I think. I think it is sort of trying to tackle it at root. There's also that point about, which we talked about early help, about joined up early help, because often those children generally are distressed in some way. They might have a special educational need, they might have a social need that is playing out in their behaviour in school, which means that they breach behaviour policies more than once and reach that point of exclusion. So I think making sure that we get that early help working well is important.
Yes, I think that's really important, and we need to keep in mind, and all professionals need to keep in mind, and I know that Councillor Lang will very much support what I'm about to say, is that we are a trauma-informed local authority. Our schools should be trauma-informed, and it's really important to, and with some of the best intervention work, obviously early intervention, but some of the best intervention work is to avoid going down those slopes, and some schools and some professionals and such are very good at making sure that young people, that they do manage to turn things around with young people, and we do have examples of that good practice, but we need to have that going out right across all our schools, and we need to keep at the heart of that as well that we are a trauma-informed local authority, and I think you would back me up on that, would you not, Councillor?
So I wonder if there's a recommendation somewhere there, Annie. For me, what I think is really very important is, and obviously there are staff in these special provision schools who would probably be concerned about children entering the school when they're not necessarily needed to be there. So I wondered if there was any way we could make a recommendation to find that data, to see how that's working. Do you think?
I think there's something about how the children get there and that journey to exclusion, and then for children who really should be not out of mainstream at all, how quickly they're reintegrated. And I think looking at those figures is important. It's a key KPI for our alternative providers and for our schools working together to make sure that reintegration happens. So I think that would be a quantitative indicator to look at, and I suppose in terms of getting underneath that, perhaps some case studies of some children at some point would be helpful. It might take a little while to get to that point.
I'll take that up outside of the meeting. Thank you very much. Any further questions? No? Well, okay, so the recommendation is to note the action plan and see regular updates at the Scrutiny Committee. Is everyone happy with that? Thank you very much. Now we move on to the work programme. Members to add items to the work programme. No?
We've got to have John, haven't we, for John Clement?
So, through you, Chair, I've noted down something to do with the Plymouth Safeguarding Partnership. You'd like that to be sort of annual, and then the child exploitation, you'd like an annual report on that as well.
Yes, that would be amazing, thank you, because I think we can't lose focus on child sexual exploitation or any exploitation within our city for our young people. Thank you.
I did also note vaping, but just an advisory that Health and Wellbeing Board have got a task and finish group on vaping in the city at the minute, which is, I think, is due to report in March.
Oh, that's just amazing.
Jay, could we put down to have John Clements as part of the Plymouth Safeguarding, to have him speak, especially the report they've put through last month, to have that come back to us in February? Thanks.
So if it's, I would like to add to the work programme, in corporate parenting, we discussed child death and child suicide, and I knew nothing about it in my ignorance, and so I would like to bring that to scrutiny as a report on that. Would be fantastic if everyone's in agreement with that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. Well, it's the first one on before time. Brilliant. Thank you. See you next time.